Hello and welcome to Dell's Gaming. I'm Dell and this is from the Depths Designer, and I am just doing another design video in this episode rather than the campaign for a couple of reasons. First of all, on the last one I did ask if the ship that I had built was of a classical design and what people thought, and there was quite a bit of discussion of various items on the original ship, so I've come back and given it a bit of a revisit because there was some bits that I was not happy with in both the look as well as just design elements, etc., because I was trying to do it all on video in one take and I just went a little too far with certain elements. So this is the latest version of the RBN Spanker. Now what I'll do is I'll bring up the ship that I was sort of like basing this on. Now I know this is not going to try and be the same, but there was an original torpedo gunboat called the Spanker, and as you can see it was a basic early design. Still had masts, but they were not for sails. Those masts were purely for flags. It was purely steam powered. So but it's got a fairly open deck. It's not massively gunned or massively armoured. Now those ships were fairly small. Yeah, there was only 735 tons, which we'll get into about sizes in a minute, and it only had like a 4-inch guns and a few torpedoes. So I've tried to replicate that. It wasn't armoured as well, so I've taken a lot of the metal out of the top, which was really problematic and causing problems with the freeboard. So as you can see now, it is sitting a little higher in the water, which is quite nice. So we've got an open bridge on it. I also redesigned the guns on the front so they're a little bit lower profile, which means that the bridge doesn't have to be so high, which I quite liked. The mast is there purely to hold some heat decoys against missiles, because at the moment we haven't got into doing anti-missile items. It is purely powered by the steam engines, or the relatively inefficient engines below, but we've kept the open deck torpedoes. I've increased them a little bit, given them a little bit more punch. So a couple of little bits on there. Also, because of the lack of reduction of weight on the top, I was able to make it a little thinner. Taken a couple of whips off there, and the hull now fits a little nicer below, and less keel is required because of the lower weight on the top. There's a bit of armour in various places, but this is not an armoured ship, so it's okay. Performs a little bit better actually now with the lighter weight. It goes through the about 12-13 meters a second, which is quite good. I changed the torpedoes, got rid of the side launching one, and actually put one in the front, which I believe is actually, from what plans I could find, was actually almost true to what the original one. It had 5 torpedo launchers with 2 turrets and 1 forward firing through the bow. So I believe that is fairly correct. So it's as close as I can get. So just a quick word on making things which are replicas. The biggest problem you have from the depths is we're all working with a 1 meter block. You know, this, like, a block is 1 meter square. In reality you've got to be working in centimeters, which is 100-to-1 ratio. So there's lots of details you're never going to get onto a ship this size, and it's always going to be bigger. If we look at the size of this is still 1100 blocks, which is relatively small. A length of 61 and 1100 blocks. Reality ships, you know, if we look at the proper ship, it would be about 735 tons this was displacing. And you can go, well, what does that mean? Well, in relation to a battleship of that time would be about 16,000 tons. So and cruisers, depending on the type, were 5 to 8,000. Some of them were almost as big as the bigger battleships. So they were, some of them were 15,000. They're almost the size of a battleship, just less guns. So you can tell that I can't actually make this as small as it should be and still keep it sort of roughly looking right. And so good respect to all of those that do make good, accurate looking ships. I think they're great, because it is very difficult, but it's very difficult to make them small so that they'll work in a campaign, which has been the bit of the problem I've had. Anyway, that is the latest one. I will be updating the workshop with this particular ship. Now, one other flying in the background you'll see, another little ship that we had is I had built previously an airship using the wings, and Krokoz here built one using the actual balloons. Now, I've done a few little bits of work on it up here. It is AI controlled now. He was having a few problems getting an AI control for this, and although it's not ideal AI control, it's got some nice removable areas for the before it starts drilling. The only problem I've got at the moment is it won't stay in one place. You can see now it's already moved out of the zone, so when in actual play it doesn't stay in one place, which is a bit annoying, but it is controlled. It will change height, and you can see it's steered by the propellers. This side is actually going fast, and this side has slowed down because it's trying to turn to the left, and I've done that with a controller set to activate when control received to your left and right. There is also rudders on here as well, but yeah, just got that working. We might bring that into the campaign just as an alternative resource gathering vessel, because it was quite interesting. I quite like it. As I say, a nice little build he did here, and he managed to get this. It's just unfortunately, as I say, that I have no way of detecting I'm in the zone, so I can't tell the engines, I'm in the zone, therefore cut the engine. So I may use a little trick and basically build something small which gets dropped into the water, and we anchor to that block that's dropped in the water. But I'll have a look into doing that later on in the campaign. But I thought I'd just show that, and as I say, it's another little submission by somebody. It's always interesting seeing all of the people's submissions and what they come up with in this campaign, and just generally in From the Depths. I think it's a great for building, and great fun for everybody to see various builds. Okay, in this build I was going to go through some armour bits, build another ship. There's one other ship I want to build. There's a bit of a cruiser, and just talk a bit about armouring in history as well as in the game, how it affects it in the game. So what I'm thinking of building is a cruiser, and what I'm going to base it upon, which I'll bring up a picture whilst I'm just putting this basic blocks in. We'll basically on the USS Atlanta, because this is an interesting sort of midway ship between the ironclads and the end of the sailing ships, for want of a better word. So I think it's a good starting point in many respects. What is some of the key items on this is it was about a 3,000 ton displacement ship, so it wasn't a massive cruiser, and this is what they class as a protected cruiser, not a armoured cruiser. Now, what is the difference between a protected cruiser and an armoured cruiser? Well, these were all still iron hulled. They were an iron hull on these. They weren't a wooden hulled ship, so they are no longer trying to represent an ironclad. But they may have used wood, but it would only be thin iron on most of the hull, It wasn't thick armoured, and the armouring was different depending if a ship was an armoured cruiser or a protected cruiser. So armoured cruisers were fairly large, and they used the belt type armouring, where the waterline and various other items were such as, you know, the engines and yeah, the gun decks, etc., were all armoured with quite thick armour systems. So we had you know, quite thick metal all around, but some of those would go up to, you know, 6, 8, even 14,000 tons. Some of them were as big as battleships. But the protected cruisers used a different system, where instead of protecting every part, all they did is they thought what was the most crucial parts, and each crucial part was armoured separately. And it was done in a number of ways. First of all, they would have multiple armoured decks to allow for plunging fire. So plunging fire was deemed to be more problematic at the ranges that of battles at this time. So the decks would be armoured. So we're going to reproduce that in some ways. Then they would also cover the sides by putting all of the coal stores of the ship into the side of the ship. So what this would mean is that your coal storage would end up being part of your armour, which is you know, reduce the amount of metal required to armour your ship on the sides. At the waterline, they'd have to go through all the coal stores. Now we can't do that. We're going to use wood, I think, in this particular instance to duplicate that. But then the actual main areas, instead of the top of the ship, was generally not armoured. A lot of the items on the top were effectively sacrificial. So they would be almost, or a crumple zone you could almost class it as, in that they would take a lot of the damage and be blown away. And just trying to get this to build, bear with me. Yeah, they would be sacrificial, and a lot of the items would just be allowed to basically be destroyed. That would be the smaller guns, the cabins on the top, and even up to the gun decks. But below it, it would be fairly secure, so that the decks below would be armoured, so that any shot coming in would have to go through a number of decks to try and yeah, so it'd have multiple armoured decks, or an armoured deck below the main gun decks, and that is what would protect most of the ship itself. So that's the basic plan I'm going with. So what we're going to do is we're first of all going to be starting with the gun deck. Again, it was a debate as to, you know, you should start with the keel. Well, I'm still of a view that that is not the case. I still think it's better to start with the gun deck of your ship, and then work backwards once you have put in your major weapons. And it's really annoying that the fill is not working. I haven't used the filler. There's been a new patch, so I don't know if it's related to that. Let's go keyboard mode. Okay, there we did. I had to be looking down. It was definitely more finicky than it had been in the past. So now this is going to be our armoured deck. So we're going to have a wooden section and an actual armoured deck. So this is going to be our main deck, and that's the first level of armour. Now also I was going to talk about, one other thing I was going to talk about is actual what constitutes armour. So from the depths, or in the campaign at the moment, wood is effectively, I'm classing as not armoured, obviously. Now one piece of metal against a deep water guard is what I class as light armour. So that's light armouring. Two pieces of metal would be a heavy-ish armour, and at the moment that's been fairly substantial. Maybe composite with wood, so metal, 2 metal and 1 wood beam would be a heavy armour, and then again, that's sufficient against a deep water guard. When we go up against the Onyx Watch, we might have to up that to 3 pieces of metal is classed as heavy armour. Also remember, in the game at the moment, the new armour penetration values are based upon the 4 meters behind where the bullet impacts. So it will look for 4 meters behind to see whether it would penetrate that particular area. So having 4 layers of metal is the maximum you could have as far as armour goes. That's the absolute maximum. So I think 2 and 3 is quite good. So what we're going to look at in this one is we're going to have a light armour deck of 1 piece of metal here, and then when the deck goes down, I'll put another 2-piece armour protecting the core insides of the ship. So we'll look at how that goes. Right, but first part is going to be weaponry. Now, the Atlanta had its armament was actually based upon, it had 2 largish 8-inch guns on the front, and then a number of 6-inch guns in a sort of gun deck in the centre, which were sort of more for broadside basis. So we're going to follow that through and take that as as an idea at this case. And we're also going to have this as a start. This is a barbetted, so they weren't necessarily always a turreted gun. Often they used an open barbette. At this stage, turrets were still not. The turret designs were very heavy. That was the biggest problem. When they built these big circular turrets, they were very basically very heavy and slow to turn. It was easier to put the gun in a barbetted area. It could allow it to have better elevation, and then they just put a gun shield around it. Eventually the gun shield got bigger and more armoured, so effectively what we now know as a turret is a development of the gun shield getting bigger around the gun, basically. So I'm going to follow the basic principle I've used before. So we're going to go here, new object, single axis turret. Let's just make sure I am facing the right way. That is forward, I believe. Let me just go back onto the main deck. Yep, that is forward. That ain't worse than starting the gun pointing in the wrong direction. It's a bad idea at the beginning. Okay, so I'm going to follow through. This is going to be a cram cannon, because I want this to be... This is going to be a slow firing, fairly hard hitting gun. So we're going to go for lots of damage rather than fast firing. So we just start there. Now I'm changing the way I'm starting to build these guns just to get them a little bit lower whilst we're working in this barbette type of system, just to get a just to reduce the size of the gun. Now I'm thinking the barbette on this will be 1 block high around the edge, maybe pushing out a little bit further than that, and inside we're going to have at least 2 blocks on the gun shield. This gauges are at the front because they will act as a as armour for it. So we'll now just put the firing piece on. So we just build this gun and then I'll duplicate it and go through some of the other areas. Now this isn't going to need high elevation, so I think I can get away with. We're putting an elevation barrel on anyway, rather than a motor. Yes, yeah, we'll just to keep an elevation on that, and then some motor-driven barrels, and then some normal barrel. Now we're also upping the basically the accuracy and the velocity of these guns, hopefully. 45 degrees, that should be good. That will give us a maximum range, and a 0.95 in accuracy. That's okay. So this is going to be an 8-inch gun, which for me means 4 gauges. So I've used 4 gauges here to build this gun at the moment. So I'm sort of basically, instead of doing it on inches, I'm doing it on gauges. So that's equivalent to 571 millimeters, which is quite big. But I'm more, as I say, just forward gauge gun. It's going to be fairly big. Right, next we're going to need some 6-way connectors to allow it to go back and put more items on the rear of it. And we're going 2 each way and down below, so we're making this a little bit lower than I had on previous guns, which we'll just now go to a mirror line. Now we need lots of loaders so that I can cram lots of things. Now, as I said, this is not going to be built for maximum damage. I think I'm going to put this for maximum HE and AP in the shells. Sorry, maximum damage, I got that totally the wrong way. This is not being built for maximum rate of fire. This is being built more for damage. So we don't need lots of loaders, which means by putting lots of loaders, when we put the HE and AP items on here, they will get the maximum they can in the oops, I can put another one there. Okay, there we go there. They'll get the maximum amount of AP and HE in there. So at the moment we've got a 4-second reload time. You can see that recoil at 29,000. That is a problem, the recoil, I've noticed on some of the ships. The recoil is causing the ships to roll. It's very difficult to stop that. So that's another problem on the fast-firing ships. On even the Spanker, I actually have to reduce the gauge because it was in the broadside configuration. It was fairly much almost turning over. Very interesting, or awkward, as the case may be. Right, so we've got that. Now let's put some HE in there. So, actually, we'll start with some AP. I want to get a good AP in this for the time that it's going to take, because penetration is important. So that's an armor value of 32 in that time. So I think I'm going to go about 50-50. So I'm going to go 50% of these are going to be AP, and then 50% about HE. So it's a fairly compact gun so far, and we've got a relatively good explosive and a 4-second reload time. Yeah, I'm okay with that. So let me just put the shield and the barbette around this. Yeah, and then we can see what space. I think I'm going to need to go wider on this ship, because when this starts going over and firing, I think that would be a bit too... I might not go as long. I might go a little bit wider, but not quite as long on the ship. We'll have a look at it. This ship might be a bit bigger. I don't want to make it too large, but let's see how we go. Yeah, let me just build the shield on this, and that'll be back in a minute. So that is the main gun at the front built. We've got reasonable size on it and a reasonable redoubt around the side, which should protect against any shells coming in. It's fairly well armoured. The idea being that most of the time the weapon is going to be facing the enemy. See, in one place I can put a little block in there. It's to be facing enemy, so most shells are going to be going against this metal on the front and not hitting the sides. And this was the basis they went on originally, that shells would be done at short range, hitting the gun shield, so the crew was protected behind. This was eventually changed because of plunging fire, and HE was causing lots of shrapnel, so this gun shield got bigger and bigger and bigger until it basically totally encompassed the gun and the crew, and hence it became a turret. So, but for the moment we'll keep this gun shield idea. I quite like the looks of it. Next, the next guns it had a load of 6-inch guns which were designed primarily as slightly faster firing guns against the smaller ships. Or the other idea was that with these multiple levels of gun is they had about the same range or similar range to the big gun, so would fire, but the smaller shells would have a bit more HE and would try to take out the less critical parts. So where the big gun, and this was the what they sometimes call the intermediary battery. So this gun would be the primary damage dealer, but because it was slow firing, it would only be firing, you know, in real terms, minutes. We measure now in shots per second. Some of the guns in the battleships of this period, before the proper, well, even when the first breech loaders were coming over, because they were not very efficient, certainly the muzzle loaders, there's elements where some of the guns were measured in like 10 or 12 minutes per shot. It was taking them. It wasn't rounds per minute, it was minutes per round. So the intermediary guns would be shooting out lots of small shots to harass the enemy and harass the ship, taking out less critical components whilst the big gun was being reloaded. And the cruisers took on this basic idea again. So this is going to be a 6-inch gun, but what we're going to do is we're going to have it slightly faster firing, not much faster firing, but its primary role is going to be long range, fast firing HE, rather than this, which is trying to cram as much HE and AP into this shell to make this as damaging as possible, but is every 4 seconds. We're trying to get these down to maybe every 2 seconds, so firing at twice the rate, but less damaging shots. So what we're going to do, these are going to be casemated, and I do still want them to be able to shoot a bit forward, certainly the front gun. So what we're going to do is, instead of in the other broadside gun, I built them directly on the deck. But on this one, we're going to still put them into a turret. So if I start with the turret block, but we're going to have it so that it turns inside, and then it'll have a hole basically for its barrel to point out, which it will be firing out, and this will allow the front one to hopefully have a slightly wider angle to be able to shoot forwards if need be. It's a slight departure from the design we are working from, but you'll see this in a number of designs where the front casemated and rear casemated guns have got a slightly wider arc than the other two guns. So we're going to follow that basis. So it's sort of like the Atlanta, but I'm just taking a little bit of license here to add a slightly different element to the to the build. So let's start with the one-axis turret. Let's point it in the right direction. It's always good to start in the right. Come on, yeah. G. There we go. Right, thank you. Right, now we want it a little bit. It's not going to be heavily armoured. And we'll see how we're going to do that in a second. So we're going to go with a basic design though that we're following here, because it's going to be firing out at the same level. And that being said, what I want to do is armour this deck a little bit first, where the guns are going to be placed. So it's placed upon a solid foundation. Now where was I going to place it, there or the one behind? I think there, and we go back one, or no, I'm going to have it up. Yeah, slightly different design for this. Yeah, I know the one that design. There we go. Okay, so we're going to have this row that contains the turret block will be metal, just to give a little bit of extra armour, although it's not the primary function of this ship. It's this isn't the primary armour, this is just to cover that turret block, which, as we know, you hit the turret block and it goes boom, quite simply. So we're going to have the actual part that sticks out there, and then armour. So am I doing that right? No, actually I'm one ahead of where I want to be. So there, it needs a one turn. Just trying to work out the correct angle for this, so that I don't go too far back, but also at the same time I'm not going too far forward. So let me just replace these back again. Okay, let's start that again. So, one axis turret. This first one we shall play 1, 2, one there, one there. Yeah, so we'll place this one just here. With one turn in front of it. That should be okay. So we want 3 gauges. Following the basic principle I've been following around now at the moment, which has been working quite well. And is that going to be correct? I want to make sure. Yeah, that'll be fine. And then we want to, or I want to put the firing piece in next. There we go. And then we'll just put a little bit. We don't want to worry about elevation. I'm just to put some motor-driven barrels to get a reasonable. I think we'll put the elevation in there still, so we can make sure we get that maximum elevation on these. We're not going to go for high accuracy. They are, its aim is going to be to have good range and firing rate. So actually I can take one off of there and then put these back. 45 degrees, yeah, 45 degrees, so we get maximum range out of these. They're not quite as high a velocity as this gun, so they won't have quite the same range, but that's understandable, and we'll get in a little closer anyway. So, right, next, some 6-way connectors. Not too many on this. We're going to keep it. We can go back a little bit. We're just working out. If I've got another gun opposite, I can't go any further than that, otherwise the gun will impede on the other gun. Next we'll put all of the loaders in, which is the most, because this is going to be quite a heavy loader build on this one. There'll be more ammo barrels than anything else. So what is our fire rate at the moment? Well, we're at 5 seconds. So let's start putting some ammo boxes. So I keep on saying ammo barrels. I'm so used to ammo barrels. We'll start putting the ammo boxes in first, and we'll see what we get down. 274. That's not bad. Let's put another one down here. 2.6. Okay, that's about double that, because this was 5. This is 4. I can either reduce the firing rate of this one. We'll have a look. Let's see if I put another block in there. That's 2.5. We're getting a diminishing return now. 2.4. Okay, I don't think it's worth putting those last 2 in there. Right, we'll go with. I'm going to go slightly more AP here, so I'm going to use 3 AP and 1 HE. I think actually, let's just see what AP that gives us. 19.6. Okay, that's. No, I'm gonna go 50-50. I think I'll go 50-50 on this. So we'll put another HE in there. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. Okay, so that's that. Now what I need to do is build the part which is going to be basically the where this is going to fire through, and the casemate. Now that's the only problem at the moment, is can I connect blocks to this part of it? No, I can't. So we're going to have it's going to have a slight area. It's not going to be armoured because we can't attach blocks directly to the turret here. If I yes, I could put them down here and then go up. There is a reason why I don't want to do that, is that then that would interfere with the armour. But let's just see as far as what we can do as far as armouring this. So if we've got, let's see, go to the hull. If we have a metal block there, and say a one there, leave a gap on here. We're going to leave 2 couple of gaps just there. That's going to be its for turning. Let's see how that turns, and then we would put a triangle. So this is going to be, it's only got one point of armour on this. Effectively, we'll put that. We'll make that at the top, like that. There we go. And then have a metal slope that way. Hopefully you can see the type of what I'm looking at here as an idea. Now the original one, that gun deck wasn't, I'm only putting one piece of metal here, so that's not a heavy armour in my view. This is lightly armoured. I suppose in terms of as far as armour goes, this would be classed as light armour. It's not heavy armour. It's a small distinction to put there. You know, it's not a given item, but we're just going to see how this goes. So if I now go and give this a turn value, and say it's number 2 still, and then we're going to get our character over towards the gun, so that way we can give it a test. So if I now come off of build mode, come over here, we can see how far it will turn. So there we can see that it's got a fairly good turn. We'll put some constraints. Now we could remove that one block here. So now we've got turn that way, and if we go this way, we would be able to turn almost all the way to the front. So if I just work out how far that would be, we can now just gauge that depending on where we want what we put up the front here. We can define how big this particular section here is and where it actually resides. We could put, say, a 2 slope here, something like that. So it's not firing fully forward like you would have in some protected or cruisers, but that's going most of the way towards that way. So it can certainly fire further than the other one. So that's the basic idea I've got there. Let me just reproduce this gun in the other areas and see where we are from there. I will possibly also create the upper deck, the decking over the top, which wasn't very much. That was just one layer on top. I might just use that as wood over the top. I will see. I might put one layer of metal over the top of it as a light armour. Although, you know, most of this isn't heavily armoured. We'd already discussed that, but I'll put a bit of light armour over the top. So back once I have done that. And welcome back. And I've got well, as you can see, a good portion of the hull and the top decks done. Couple of bits I've got to work on. Is a bit of smoothing on this front, I think, needs to be done, which I'll do offline. One bit tidying up. But generally it's here. I've put these autocannons on there because the original ships, cruisers especially, did have some quick firing guns to go against small little, you know, torpedo boats, etc. So I've just put some autocannons on there to replicate that. Now the original ship in the picture at the start did have original masts, and they were originally put on for some square sails, so that the ship could do long range, because although they were steam engines, the steam used so much coal that was only ever used when close to places they could refuel or close to the coast. So they used to use the sails to give them longer range, but they were actually eventually removed when the engines were improved and they could go further distances, and then they did actually remove the actual sailing mast. They did used to leave a mast for signals, but there was no rigging on it. It was just a similar to what was on the torpedo boat. It was just a basic cross, so they could hang some signals on there if they needed to. The conning tower was armoured. I had a check on it. I haven't got any, did have a check on it, and it did have an armoured conning tower. So I mean, it was only about 1.5 inches of steel, but it was still armoured. So I've armoured that up as well, sort of in keeping with the style and the shape of the ship. It was just behind the front gun as a forecastle, I think, as much as anything, or forebridge rather than the rear. The rear deck here would have been some space for lifeboats and other bits and pieces, so I've left a bit of space for possibly adaptation later, maybe. I haven't got any plans to be able to deck plans to know what was really here, but I think there was some launches and other little boats potentially there, which I'm not going to put in because scale wise I couldn't make something that small. Yeah, so we've got these, the gun and a gun deck, and each gun is separated by a door and a bit of wood just in case we get explosions through. They're not heavily armoured. If a shot does get through this gap, there is a chance it will hit them. So it's not ideal in that regard, but hopefully they will survive. Again, this is a protected cruiser, not an armoured cruiser. So now the protection side of it, we had this belt of metal, which was the first deck armour. Now we've put a second deck protection in, and this will be protected along the side. So this will be metal on this part of the hull as well, because this was the protection part of it. Now in this deck, what I'm going to put is some wooden resource containers, and that would sort of replicate the coal storage, which was also part of the armour, because they would put coal all along the edge of the hull, so that to act as like a ablative armour. So I'll put a lot of coal storage in there. But what I'm going to do next is build the rest of the hull. I'll be putting an engine in this section, nothing special. It's not a very powerful engine. This isn't going hyper fast, got no shield, so I'm just going to replicate a steam engine with plenty of cylinders but very little else, so it won't be very efficient, and it'll be a bit big for everything. And then I'll put a couple of a smokestack up the top here for all of the exhaust to come out, so we can get a nice bit of puffs of smoke as such. So basically I'll be back once I have finished this part of the hull and shaped it up. I think the next stage will be combat testing once I have finished this all off. Hopefully it won't be too big. At the moment we're up to 1700 blocks, which is okay, a little big. I was hoping 2,500 would be my block limit for this cruiser, but it looks like it's going to be a bit bigger than that. Just sheer scale, which is fine. We've got quite large guns on that. I'm not too unhappy at that, but we'll see. It might be 3,000, I think, by the time we finish. But let's see how far we get. So, see you in a while. And welcome back. And this is the unpainted but just about completed Atlanta. It's reasonable. It has I think it's followed over, obviously taken some license with the looks, but the hull is now complete. Just about. It looks like got a bit of a gap there, but we won't worry about that one, I think, for the moment. We'll just put that little bit in there. There we go. That just completes that off. Needed a fair bit of lead still, just to finish it off. I just saw a couple of bits on that, and I need to paint the hull as well, as you can see, give it the basic paint scheme before I put it up and bring it in. You can see that it's mainly wood. It's got a reasonably high freeboard on this one. Has a little problem sometimes in the turns. Getting the rudder and propulsion balanced can be sometimes a pain with ships, but otherwise it's quite good. Speed wise, it's going along at about 10 meters a second, which is okay for this type of vessel and the intention at the moment. It's faster than the battleships or the ironclads, but slower than, say, the torpedo gunboat. So let's see how it fights, which would be the next thing to try, I think. So I could give you a bit of a tour. We have got actually all of the area has got staircases down to the various locations, including the engine room down at the very bottom, which is protected by all of the metal. And then the other areas I have added, if I can get to the right place, I have put the resource boxes into the walls to act as extra armour. So that's part of the protected side of this ship. But let's see now how it does against an enemy. So let's bring something in. Now we'll bring in a Marauder and say a Vanguard as a good starting point, just to see how it does. So guns are already aiming in by the looks of it. They're trying to get their range. There we go. And what range are we at? We're actually about 1200 to 1500, so they've got quite a good range on the main guns. Let's see. Now it's obviously closing in at this moment, so the guns are not hyper accurate, but oh, that did a nice bit of damage. So they are damaging. Again, these are not one-shot killers. These are designed to wear down a ship and be supporting a battleship, but it's doing a fair bit. Oh, there's that big shot from the Marauder. Did do a fair bit of damage to us, I think, but we can weather the damage quite nicely at the moment. So we've got the 6-inch guns are also firing now because he's gone broadside. If we look at our system here, that shot in from the Marauder did a bit of damage, but it's almost already been repaired. So we have the 6-inch shells now also firing. The other Marauder shot missed. So the 6 inches are also just chewing up a little bit, much faster rate of fire, as you can see, which was the intention. And then we get big shots in from the main cannon every now and again, which do significantly more damage on occasion. We can weather damage. We're not highly protected, but the main bit is damage doesn't hit anything vital. We've got a lot of airtight areas, and you can see the casemated gun is firing slightly backwards, which was the intention. So it's helping the ship. It's trying to get away at the moment, trying to increase the range to try and get a reasonable. Tries to try and keep it 500-600 meters rather. Doesn't like to be within 500. And the system is now at a good range, and even the autocannons are firing at the target. And the system has repaired itself quite nicely. So the protected system of the armour has worked as planned so far. We take damage to the guns and the top superstructure, but the main engine and the hull keeps on ticking. Okay, well, hopefully that's been a reasonable build there. I will bring this one into the campaign with the others. Maybe act as an extra to the or a cover for the destroyer fleet. It's a little slow though, so maybe I'd need a faster version, but it'll be a support for the Minotaur, and it's the start of the next generation of ships. I may do a fully armoured cruiser, but I think next we'll look at, we'll see how it does in the campaign, but we would look at one of the next generation of ironclad or battleships pre-dreadnoughts, which have these barbette style large guns and tertiary weapons, maybe 3 sets of weapons on it. So that'll be a significantly larger vessel. This is actually gone up to about 3,000 blocks, and I think a pre-dreadnought, I would expect a pre-dreadnought to be around 4,500 to 5,000 blocks in my estimation at this time. I think that would be a reasonable size for a ship of that firepower. So, but we'll have a check on that and see what actually ends up being the result. As always, leave comments down below. Do you think this is a classic build? Could it be, does it fit within the cruiser, the protected cruiser, rather than armoured cruiser, if that makes sense to what we talked about? Obviously it could be more efficient. This is still using cram cannons. I've not used the advanced cannons yet, unless we start bringing those in the next few builds, quite possibly. This is still, if you had to pick an era, this is still the 1880s, early 1890s, that type of era now. So we have got the start of breech loading guns, but a lot of the guns were still muzzle loading. Actually, even in this era there was a lot of use of muzzle loading. The breech loaders were now coming in, but they were still having a few problems until they started using smokeless cordite and nitrate based powders. As always, keep playing the game, please click the like button, but above all, have fun.